Warum willst du das? Warum willst du, dass die Zukunft wieder genauso passiert?
Weil das, was heute entsteht, der Anfang vom Ende ist. Die schwarze Materie, sie muss entstehen, damit ich sie in der Zukunft zu ihrer neuen Bestimmung führen kann. Dem Ende dieser Welt. Ich bin der Auslöser. Aber nicht für das, was du denkst. Ich bin der Auslöser dafür, dass du zu dem wirst, was ich heute bin.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There's nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks? Why do I say this? Because we got Holy Ghost power!
You're listening to a podcast exploring faith and fear, what scares us and what saves us. This is the fear of God. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Fear of God podcast. Your favorite podcast, my favorite podcast, everyone in the world's favorite podcast, so they say. Speaking to you right now is Nathan Rouse, one of your hosts. Now, typically with me is fellow co-host, yellow raincoat wearing Reed Lackey. And he was here a minute ago. But strangely, he was kind of favoring his neck. I don't really know what that was about. And he said something to me that, I don't know. I'll tell you guys what he said, and y'all be the judge. He was like, Nathan, I think we're a perfect match. Never think anything else. And then he just left. And, maybe he'll be back. One can only hope. But today, everyone, we are finishing so many things. We are finishing Speaking in Tongues Phase 2, and thus Speaking in Tongues, period. So we are bringing that series home finally. We are also finishing what we have been tagging in on for several weeks now, that of discussing Netflix's Dark Season 2. If you're curious what Speaking in Tongues is all about, go check out our whaling episode from the top of September. At its most basic, we have been attempting at least to show solidarity with brothers and sisters throughout the world, recognizing that Jesus is on every road and highlighting foreign language horror in the process. Again, in this final edition, we are sort of beaming to another dimension with the finale of Dark Season 2. But was ist das? It's foreign correspondent Vera Gowdy. Vera!
Hi.
Welcome back to the show.
Hello. It's been a while.
It has. It's been, we're still like 3 days out from the apocalypse, so I think we've got a little time. But I'm glad to have you here. It's always a pleasure to have our foreign correspondent here reporting from the Great White North.
Literally white right now.
I'm going to say this and you're going to be like, no, you're not. But I am a little envious of that. That's pretty cool. So Vera, I did want to, thank you. You recently acquired for yourself a Fear of God mug, did you not?
Oh, I did. I got a That Ain't Right mug.
Well, that is so...
I'm drinking out of it right now, my coffee.
That is so right, because likewise, I'm drinking hot tea out of my It's Alive mug. It's just the nerdiness never ends. So
you gotta keep the theme going.
Yeah, I do feel the need to apologize to you for the shipping costs. You Canadians have a lot going for you, but shipping costs is not one of those things.
Yes.
Speaking of merchandise, yes, you can acquire a That Ain't Right mug, which Vera is modeling for us now, and It's Alive mug, which I am modeling for you now. You can go to tpublic.com, plug in the Fear of God podcast, all one word. You can find t-shirts, you can find magnets, you can find pillows, you can find mugs, you can find Reed! Hey, buddy!
Hey.
Welcome back. That was that had a very kind of Kramer feel to it. The way you just kind of laughed on entrance. Wow. That was lovely. I'm really happy that just happened.
I mean, you just announced that you can find me on TeePublic. I mean, that's pretty.
I can
amazing.
imagine the shipping cost to ship a human being to Canada.
You know what? It's pretty bad. Only to Canada though. That's the.
I was gonna say it's less than you'd think. Not that I would know.
Oh wow! Did
right.
you? So you don't watch The Office? You don't watch The Office.
There's two people here. Who are you speaking to?
I'm talking to you, Nathan. I'm sure Vera may or may not watch The Office, but
I have
context.
watched The Office. Yes.
So Vera watches The Office. You have not watched The Office. There's an episode of a Halloween episode of The Office in which the character Creed comes in and everybody's in their costume, and Creed is just covered in blood. And they're looking at him, and the style of The Office is that occasionally they have asides to the camera and everything, and then
I know what it is.
Oh, you've seen the have you seen the joke that I'm about to make, or you just know what the Office is? Okay,
just giving you crap.
Of course, and I love when you do that. It's so fun for me. So Creed is just like covered in blood, and so then he's like, "Oh yeah, that's a really scary costume," and then it turns to his aside to the camera, and he says, "Oh, it's Halloween. That's very fortunate." It's awesome.
That's funny.
I love it. But yeah, despite popular opinion, you cannot find me on tpublic.com. I am here though, and as you already said, we're welcoming Vera. Vera,
we are welcoming Vera.
Welcome back to the Fear of God. Last time we were talking about eyes without faces, and it was quite horrendous. But
however, that said, we were also talking about Dark Season 1, so that it kind of works.
It is. It's true. So how have you been, Vera?
Pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah. Our hockey commentators up here are all fighting and warring, and
Ooh.
the Leafs coach just got fired. So in terms of our national sport, things aren't going great. But we did have an election.
How'd that go?
Well, Trudeau won again.
Yeah.
I mean, government.
safe for that whole blackface thing. But
wow, you just gotta love the internet, just dredging up everything.
I know.
Everybody.
It's the Wild West out there.
It really is. So good. Good for him. Good for you guys. Good for everybody. Good for everybody.
Yeah. So the hockey teams aren't doing so great, or at least whatever. You do. Wolverine is from Canada, so that's good. But I did, just while we're all together again. I did have a question for you guys, and that is, I am, as I am prone to be, quite curious, sort of like a cat. And this evening, at least, I'm curious to know what you're watching, what you're reading. No one's backing me up. What are you listening to? It is cold. It may be snowy up in Canada, but it is cold where I'm sitting right now.
Are you back out in the garage now?
No. I was making a reference to the fact that I was feeling out in the cold, like nobody was backing me up in the song. That was the
no backup vocals.
Nope.
Oh,
that's all good.
So that's how you feel every time that I have a joke that just falls completely flat. I know now how that feels.
So what you watching, Reed? Reed, what are you watching, buddy?
Okay, so at the moment, this past week, it has been a lot of classic short cartoons from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It has been a lot of classic films from my period time when I was growing up. It has been a whole lot of Disney Plus, because I did take the plunge and purchased Disney Plus. My family and I have all been thoroughly enjoying the various things on there. There's honestly, it's been so far. For me, it has been just a lot of catching up. I didn't realize, because they announced all of the films that they were going to have available at launch. They announced all those, but I was unaware that they were going to have so much in the treasure trove of like those classic cartoons from when I was growing up that used to introduce or like fill space on the Disney Channel. And man, I have just been diving into dozens and dozens of those. Those are really, really fun, and take me back to when I was a wee lad.
Yeah, my kids have gone from watching Frozen on DVD to Frozen on Disney Plus, so
Nice.
utilizing the service really well.
So Disney wins. Is the point
Right.
you're making.
Right.
They always do.
They do. So, but yeah, but that's been a good chunk of what I've been enjoying. The features that I've checked out on there so far have been The Black Cauldron, The Sword and the Stone. I watched The Great Mouse Detective. I, of course, checked out The Mandalorian. So, yeah, it's fun. I'm enjoying it. I know.
Well, now
everybody's
let me
talking
ask
about
you.
it,
I'm not going to use The Mandalorian as my Whatcha Watchin, but as our resident mild Star Wars fan, I don't mean that rudely, but you know what I'm saying? Like, as someone who's less
I'm a nominal
enthused about
Star
the
Wars
series
fan. Yeah.
as a whole, do you like The Mandalorian?
I like it
What are you
quite a
feeling?
bit. No, I liked it quite a bit.
It's pretty cool.
I feel like it's taking its time. The presentation, like the production value, is very high. But I feel like it's sort of taking its time with how it's unpacking the story. So we'll see. I don't want it to dredge into like
It's a little early.
Yeah, I don't want it to dredge into like feeling like it's dragging. But it helps that the episodes themselves are pretty brief and easily digestible. So yeah, I'm enjoying it quite a bit.
I like that they've kind of taken a page out of Dark Crystal's book, and they're doing the Muppet mix with the CGI.
Yes.
So they're going old school with it.
Oh,
Are you
yes.
talking about a little baby Yoda?
Oh my
I love Baby
goodness.
Yoda.
Little baby Yoda.
That's the greatest thing to hit Star Wars since Rey summoned the lightsaber. I mean, like that is like that's amazing.
Well, that's not my Star Wars. I'm just kidding. All those stupid nerds.
That old Baby Yoda is just amazing.
Baby Yoda is the best. Now,
50-year-old Baby Yoda.
Vera, what are you exactly referring to? Because I don't think Baby Yoda is CG at all. I could be wrong. I don't know.
I don't think Baby Yoda is CG. I think he is a Muppet, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I
think
but
it's a mix of.
There are certain things that are CG, or that they do in CG, and then there are certain things that they Muppet. So in the same way, the Dark Crystal TV show merges the two, or they like blend it. Yeah.
Yeah, there is no way that Muppet swallowed that little creature. Like, there's no way that
frog
physically happened. Yeah, no, that was definitely CG. But yeah, I like that it actually.
No, I think that was all practical.
They've come a long way with Muppets. I'm just telling you.
Oh, yeah. So Mandalorian, it's good stuff. For listeners, as of this recording, we're only 2 episodes in. Only 2 episodes have been released, that is. So depending on what happens in tomorrow's release may change things. Vera, what have you been up to?
Rob and I caught this show on Netflix called Daybreak.
Okay.
It's a post-apocalyptic teen, I don't know, drama, comedy. And it's about a world where nobody over the age of 18 has survived the apocalypse, and they all become like zombies, but not zombies, who they bite, but they don't turn you into zombies when they bite. And they say the last thing that they were thinking before the apocalypse hit, before the explosion happened, which is pretty funny. And the teens have basically grouped themselves into factions a la the Mean Girls cafeteria. So you have like the jocks have set up their own post-apocalyptic group. The cheerleaders are called the Cheermazons, and they've set up their group. There's like the Kardashian crew. There's the people in the mall. Like there's a bunch of different teen groups that have formed factions during this apocalypse. Matthew Broderick is in it. And it's kind of done, like there's definitely shout outs to all kinds of older, like horror shows and also older shows. So there's a lot of shout outs to like Ferris Bueller, and then him making the cameo appearance is pretty cool. There's a character named Sam Dean. And so anyone who has watched Supernatural knows that that's a shout out to Supernatural. There's just a lot of really cool and funny and quirky stuff. We enjoyed it overall. It was pretty good. It definitely makes you feel very far removed from high school. In some aspects, but it's a really fun show.
Awesome.
Just listening to you describe that, which I wasn't familiar with, I don't envy like pitch meetings these days. Like, what is the elevator pitch for that? Like, okay, give me a 3-sentence. Oh God, I'm already lost. It's like
you may have noticed that I'm not really good at the 3-sentence description. I kind of go weird with my descriptions and make things sound worse than they are.
Well, even just you describing, I'm like, good Lord, the genre specificity here is pretty insane. But cool. So Daybreak on Netflix, and Reed is, juicing on Disney Plus. So wow. I just need a minute, y'all. Like, I need to clear the lane a little bit because an unexpected thing happened this week that I just need to toot the horn a little bit. Like Reed is our, like, on the Fear of God at least. Reed is our celebrity magnet. They fawn over him. They adore him.
Not that many fawn over him.
They ask Reed for autographs.
At least one did.
It's just, but I had Vera. Do you know where this is going? You saw this, right?
I don't know.
Okay. I had a very unexpected turn of events play out to my week this week. So, a little bit of story time. So everybody get comfy. Crisscross applesauce. So I won this sales goal this year for my work that was pitched as just an overnight to New York. Like, me and whoever else, like if a person, anyone could have hit this sales goal. So like if Reed hit it and Vera hit it, all three of us with the boss are going to New York City for a night, kind of like hang out, go to a nice restaurant, kind of lodge, in Manhattan in the center of everything. And so me and this other guy hit this goal throughout the year. And on Monday, literally this happened on Monday, the boss was like, do y'all want to go tomorrow?
All right.
Right. So like tomorrow, the next day, and both of you have children and spouses and lives. You can imagine how like, wait, what? Tomorrow? Like you want me to go to New York tomorrow?
Seems abrupt.
Yeah, that's that sales life. But anyway, so I got all the clearances necessary, and on Tuesday, less than 24 hours from when this was even a conversation, I was on a plane to New York City. Well, the people I work with, they're like, just, envision sales people, sales men typically, and you're not too far off the mark. This sounds disparaging. I don't totally mean it to be, but not a super like cultured sort of environment, right? Their idea was go to New York and eat a steak, right? Like that is the cultural experience they're after and chasing. Well, I'm like, okay, we're going to New York City for 24 hours. I would feel like an idiot if I didn't just see or attempt to try to see some theater, right? Because that's the place on the planet where you try to do that. So the night before, I did a little bit of research once I knew this was more or less happening to see what was out and what was kind of short. I didn't have a ton of time. I knew they were going to want me at dinner. So I found an hour and a half show that turns out featured Tom Hiddleston, he of MCU Loki fame, and Charlie Cox, he of Netflix Daredevil fame. And it's called Betrayal. It's by Harold Pinter. And I was like, hey, when in Rome. So got my ticket to Betrayal, went at a 7:00 curtain on Tuesday night. And after the show, went out to the stage door, which I've only been to one other Broadway show. So this is not like me just telling people this out of a place of knowledge. The stage door, it's like where you go outside and you can potentially meet these people. And I went and met Tom Hiddleston and Charlie Cox, and it was amazing.
That's pretty awesome.
And I got my picture with both of them, and yeah, was pretty amazing. So my Whatcha Watchin is also Who You Meetin'. I watched Betrayal on Broadway, or off Broadway. I don't totally know exactly geographically how that worked out, and got to meet Loki and Daredevil. Just
that's pretty awesome.
Good old Marvel team up.
That's really cool.
How was the play?
It was Pinter, man. It was just no, it's
He's all like,
it was good. It was good. Like my only inroad to Harold Pinter's material is I did actually produce one of his shows years ago, but not even because I knew about it, but because the guy who's a buddy that I got to direct it knew it and wanted to produce it or wanted to direct it. And they're like, okay, fine. Pinter is very cerebral. It's very like minimalist. So this particular play, it's actually a really good, a really cool concept. It's the two of those gentlemen, and then there's a woman character, and so it's just three performers. Literally, the set is two chairs, at least this production, and they did some funky things with the lighting and the set, which is just a blank wall basically. But it's a backwards told relationship in demise. So. It starts with Charlie Cox's character and I feel like an idiot because I don't know the actress. Her name is Zawe Ashton. It's Zawe. I don't know how to say her first name, but Miss Ashton. The two of them, and it's their characters reflecting on the affair they had with each other that is now no longer in play, and is like 2 years after it ended. They're reflecting on that. Well, then you start going backwards.
The aforementioned betrayal.
Exactly. Well, and then
it all makes sense now.
There's another betrayal baked into the premise too, because Hiddleston is Zowie's husband. He's best friends with Cox, and so but it tells it in reverse, so you're kind of backwards jumping through the story. It's pretty cool. But the broader point is it led to me getting to meet some pretty cool people.
That is awesome.
I was excited.
Oh, of course.
You should be.
No, of course.
It was very cool. That has been another edition, you guys, of What You Watching?
What you watching?
What you reading?
And who you meeting?
And what are you listening to?
Stories about Nathan going to New York because he wants to say his friends.
That's amazing. That is amazing. All right. So we are, you guys, we're bringing it home. The apocalypse is upon us, whether we want it to be or not. And we are going to be discussing in this Fear of God podcast episode installments 7 and 8 of Dark Season 2. I am curious, Reed. So this is you can fill out however much or little you want. But a couple weeks ago, I pitched to you 3 notions, and I'm just curious where you fell on these notions. I pitched to you that by the end of the season, 1, you would dislike Hannah even more than you already did before you answer. I'm going to tell the other 2. The other one I said was you would see Ulrich fall even farther. And then the third one was that you would be frustrated by the ending. How on point was any of that?
2 out of 3 of those were entirely accurate.
That's not bad.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. Meatloaf told me that. And so, but 2 out of 3 of those were absolutely accurate. Perhaps because of in this world where people try to prevent things or prepare things and then ultimately cause them, maybe because you had said that the ending was going to frustrate me, it did not actually wind up frustrating me. Yeah, of course. Listen. I'm not a novice at this. I've been doing this podcasting.
Right, you're George. Tell me about the time travel, George.
But no. So no. Honestly, in all sincerity, I think probably because I was prepared. Because when I saw the ending of season 1, I didn't have any clue how anything was going to end. But this time, kind of going into it and knowing, okay, there's going to be a lack of concrete resolution. There's going to be some dangling threads left narratively. But I will say, and we'll get into more specifics as we get into it, the ending of season 2 not only did not frustrate me, actually kind of galvanized and excited me for what season 3 might be offering us. So that was the only one of those predictions that didn't quite come to play. Was it because you prepped me for it? Was it in spite of that? We will never know. We'll never know.
Vera, you were present in conversation for the middle of season 1, and so we haven't chatted about this show since then. How would you, before we dive into details of these episodes, how would you generally sort of compare your feelings of 1 to 2?
I think that I liked season 1 a little bit more, only because I think there was just more of an air of mystery in season 1. And season 2, as the story got bigger and more people got involved, it kind of felt a little bit unwieldy. And then I'm not a fan of how it ended. Your prediction is correct for me. It, as much as I liked, and I know you guys love the TV show Lost, that was one of the things that I didn't like about Lost.
Read, pull her plug.
I'm so sorry. I'm fired. You're going to have to find another.
How did she get on
This has been our final appearance of Vera Gowdy. Just have the dial tone. That's all it is. It's just, in the editing.
Just mute her and she doesn't know the rest of the conversation.
In the editing, it's just you hear the dial tone click in. It's like, I don't know what she said.
I've been dead the whole time.
Now, clarify, Vera, and we don't have to dwell here long lest our mine and Reed's mutual blood pressure continue to go up. Like, are you referencing you didn't like the time travel aspect of Lost? What do you mean when you say this has reminded you of something you didn't like there?
I don't mind that in both shows, and I'm going to reference another TV show. I don't mind in both shows that time is kind of Jeremy Bearimy, like that it's...
Jeremy you pulled out Jeremy Bearimy. Oh.
I don't
She's
know.
back on now. She's back on now.
Well, I guess I'm out then, because I can't... Jerry. I mean, should I?
So, ladies and gentlemen, the three shows we have just referenced in quick succession have been Lost, The Good Place, and Arrested Development in very, very quick succession. So,
with little explanation.
Yes, no context.
The Good Place.
Anyway, sorry,
Okay, cool.
Vera, you should be allowed to speak.
It's okay. No, so the reference in The Good Place is Ted Danson's character says that time goes a little bit forwards, a little bit backwards. When you look at it in 4D, the way time goes, it spells out the words Jeremy Bearimy instead of it being linear or circular or whatever. It looks like the words Jeremy Bearimy. So that's kind of how I've been looking at. I look at both Lost now and Dark. Is that it's Jeremy Bearimy. It's kind of, it goes all over the place. It goes a little bit forwards, a little bit backwards. I don't like the side jumps, like the parallel dimensional stuff.
Gotcha.
Well, I mean, on Lost, it's not really parallel. They're just...
Wow.
It's just...
This is our guest, Nathan.
I know. Woo! Hey, Canada. All right.
No, that actually makes
good.
sense. So I want to comment on that because we're kind of jumping a bit to the end, but we'll get into the specifics of why when we get into the particulars of the episode. But the ending of Dark Season 2, for those of you who have not been following along, but yet for some reason are still listening to this episode, we love you. Please stick around. But for those who have not seen the show, there is an element at the end of Dark Season 2 that as Vera described, like kind of a parallelism where there is a multiverse quality to what the show is giving us. Whereas before, in the entirety of Season 1 and in the 98% of Season 2, it had only been moving back and forth in linear space. People encountering each other. Yeah, yes. Been moving, but ostensibly in the same sort of dimension of each other. But there's an element, we can get into more specifics later at the end, that introduces not only is it navigating back and forth through time, but also navigating side to side through different versions of these same worlds. And yes, I can totally understand somebody who's not on board for that narrative wrinkle, whereas I tend to get rather excited by those kinds of plot lines, and so that's why I was kind of excited and galvanized by the ending.
On that point, I think the end of Season 2, and yes, we will rewind and go back through these two episodes, but the reason, and I wish I could say it was intentional, Reed, to overhype what might be disappointment in the finale, but it really was just, I was disappointed because in a way that the future jump at the end of Season 1, even that didn't quite kind of perturb me as much as, Martha with the good hair popping into our dimension and being like, what up? She's got her golden snitch. And because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so elusive. Every time you are starting to wrangle this into some sort of cohesive narrative in your head, is like, oh my God, y'all, really? How on earth with one season left? Is it 8 episodes? Is it 10 episodes? Is it 30 episodes? I don't know. But with one season left, so it's funny. Reed, at the top of this episode, right before we started recording, Rob Gowdy, Vera's husband, was on, and I was inquiring of him about his feelings on Season 2, and I don't love the feeling that Season 2 left with me. What I said to him was, I don't love the feeling Season 2 left with me, which is, okay, I kind of need to know what 3 is to know how I feel about 2, which is not something that happened with 1. With 1, I was like, this is a pretty complete, clearly we're tangenting right here at the end with Season 1, but more or less, it felt pretty complete. And, one could argue that sort of happens in 2, but for my personal sort of experience, it was like, well, now I'm kind of neutral on this season until I kind of know where this goes. But regardless, let's, for the sake of just sort of clarity, dive into some details here, starting, if it's okay, dive into episode 7, which is titled The White Devil. Yeah, so this one's got a pretty big... I will say for myself, rewatching this now, season 7 is super strong. This is a good episode. Specifically, the Hannah Ulrich stuff resurfacing in the way that it does. Holy cow. That was intense.
And you had mentioned about, hating Hannah more, and Ulrich slides down further. Like, that's pretty awful.
That's brutal.
I mean, like that.
Hannah's the worst.
She really is. She is one of the most, like, I'm really frustrated with Katerina right now and how, like, self-centered she is and how sort of self-obsessed she is with just, it's all just kind of about her and what she knows and what she wants to figure out. But, like, Hannah is malicious and premeditated awfulness. Like, it's just terrible. Woman goes all the way back in time just to tell a man, like, just to mess with a man. Like, that is awful.
Hell hath no
That's
fury
cold.
like a woman scorned who has a time machine.
That's colder than Canada today, man. Like, that is awful. Like,
But let's not cast every aspersion on Hannah here. A recurring theme that is going to be present for me in these last 2 episodes is what a friggin' dope Elder Jonas, or EJ, as I'm going to call him because he acts like a stupid teen. The entire... it's amazing to me how good season 1 props up this, kind of Roland Deschain, mystical, time traveling kind of badass, just making machinations and, tinkering and figuring stuff out. Like, and then if you could describe Elder Jonas in season 2, it's lazy dummy. Like he
Time hobo.
Yeah, time hobo. There you
time
go.
Hobo. That's perfect.
He's just laying in bed. You left a time machine just sitting out, and you're kind of
where
vindictive
anybody can just walk
mama.
around and pick it up.
Right? Why are you not like handcuffing that to yourself or something? Don't trust that mama.
At least put it under the bed. Like, make an effort.
Yeah, make him work for it.
Yeah, something.
I am not a fan of old EJ. Another thread that develops, and I'm curious from both of y'all how you felt overall about how this landed. Another thread that materializes rather profoundly in these last 2 is basically the payoff of Clausen's pursuit.
Yes.
And I'll say this for myself and then get y'all's feedback. Like, I don't know that the punch is quite as forceful, like the impact of the punch is quite as forceful as it could be if we had a little more time to understand Clausen's motives along the way, or a few more breadcrumbs to understand his intentions. But I like that actor, and as much as I feel like a few puzzle pieces might be missing from his narrative with Alexander, he is hardcore committed in those interrogation scenes, and I really kind of dug those scenes, even though I don't know that I totally think they're earned.
Yeah, I think the actor is a really good actor. And I think that he does a good job selling his character. I just still am they didn't really, I'm sure we'll get it in season 3, more closure about, or more understanding about what exactly is happening with him and what's his name? Buddy? Winden?
Alexander.
Alexander. Yeah. That's it, but he's good.
Winden is the town, Vera.
Winden is the town.
I'll third the praise heaped behind Clausen, the actor. And I actually really enjoyed the reveal because I needed him to have something. There was, at least in why he's doing it or what he knows, the character was so obviously 3 steps ahead of what we were given. And so I actually liked the reveal that, like, okay, yeah, he's been searching for his brother all this time. And so, yeah, and I appreciated that. I appreciated that it connected to the larger narrative of essentially his presence will lead, and we'll get into the specifics when we talk about the next episode, but his presence will lead to the actual apocalypse coming. Like he kind of opens the possibility that it will occur. And so I liked that they substantiated that character. I think I'd expressed in an earlier conversation, in an earlier episode, that they were giving him so little screen time in the early episodes. I like that they anchored him in something truly impactful by the time the season was over.
I think, though, Nathan, your point in that because he had so little screen time in the beginning, that it does kind of feel undeserved. Like, it kind of feels like they're shoehorning him more into the ending because they need to get that story in before it ends. And that might be because it's 2 episodes shorter this season. I don't know. But yeah, it does feel like it's happening quickly.
Well, and I will compare this plot thread to my frustration at the Charlotte plot threads of season 2, which is what super frustrates me about Charlotte season 2 is but who are my parents is just not a question we as viewers even knew to bother wondering about pre-season 2. Whereas what I do at least like about the Clausen Alexander sort of standoff is Alexander's 1980s entry into the narrative is under mysterious circumstances. So at the very least, they're following that thread. And I kind of like that. You know, it's like, okay, you know, at least there's some built-in framework as to where this plot aspect is coming from, even if, again, it feels a little unearned in what we do get in season 2. I'm going to throw one last sort of just fun note out for the moment, and then I want y'all to toss some stuff in here because there's a lot. I did take a lot of notes on 7 and 8. But I just love, so Peter Doppler, you know, Charlotte's husband, he's confronting Franziska and Magnus and Elizabeth. And I just, like, and I've craved so much in season 2, like real human character moments. And this one flirts with that, but then just goes so sideways because it's just this great moment where the kids have been, you know, kind of off doing their own thing. And Peter Doppler, the dad, like this father figure, is just wagging his finger real hard at these kids. And I just love that his interrogation isn't, you know, you missed your curfew, or, oh my God, you're pregnant, or, you know, guys, let me tell you about the birds and the bees, or stop hitting your sibling. Like any number of normal parental things. No. Peter says, so you traveled through time, which, by the way, itself is not the main thing he gets mad about. Then he yells, to what year? Like, that's when he raises his voice. I just love, like, it makes no sense on any show but Dark that a dad yelling at his kids, so you traveled through time to what year? Makes perfect sense.
Tell me.
And then the teenagers are like, what? You knew about this the whole time? How dare you not tell us and let us in on this thing? And I'm like, he doesn't owe you any explanations. He's your parent.
Well, but I also love the note that, like, when he yells to what year, like, what is, you know, it's not like you're saying, which friend did you spend the night with? It's like, what year? What do you mean? Like, why does it matter what year? Is your problem that we time traveled? Or is it your problem that there's a particular year you didn't want us to visit? I don't know. It's just a weird kind of. It's really funny. This is just Nathan's musings. Carry on. Take it away, somebody.
It is really funny. But, like, here's the fun. Like, all this season, I think I heard at least 6 characters say to somebody else, wait, you knew about this the whole time? And here's the frustrating thing. Like, the statement, you knew about this the whole time, like, can somebody please stop for a moment and say, and, like, define the whole time for somebody else in the scene? I get so frustrated when a character throws out, like, wait, you knew about this already? And why nobody on the planet just says, I found out about this yesterday. Like, and I'm still processing it, okay?
Right.
If
Nobody's processing on this show. They're all just totally cool with it.
No, they just, and they made it, like, okay, so I have a note. It's actually from 8. But I have to introduce it right now because it's so relevant to what we're talking about. There's a moment, man, I love Patchy. Patchy's like the unsung hero of Dark. I'm going to skip to a moment, and it's an inconsequential moment ultimately, but I'm going to skip to a moment that's in episode 8, but I'm going to mention it here. There's a moment where he is talking to Charlotte, where Patchy is talking to Charlotte. And they're talking about, like, he's telling her about the radioactive waste that's been buried at the nuclear power plant and everything. And then she says something. I forget which character she's talking about. I think Ulrich or something. Or no, she might be talking about Jonas. And then she says he's back. And then Patchy says, wait, Jonas came back? Or he's back? And then she says, yeah, he came from the future. And I love that she just like, and she says that. She just throws it out there. Yeah, he came from the future. And then she walks around him and leaves the room. And I love this. I don't know whose decision this was, but the camera just lingers on the poor guy for like 10 to 15 seconds as he's just standing there like staring off in the distance like, what is happening? She just said that.
That's so funny because I've got a note about that too and joked that maybe then his other eye was going to pop out with just, like extreme brain explosion. Whoa!
I have a note about that scene as well, where he literally spills the beans about like the whole conspiracy at the nuclear power plant. Like he tells her everything except what happened to his freaking eye.
Yeah, oh no, exactly.
Yeah.
We are never going to find out what happened to that eye. Like, never. Oh,
I do appreciate the meta nature of that.
That is so funny. Anyway, so
Vera, toss something in the mix about episode 7.
How about Claudia and her dad?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Now, did either of y'all, I did not because, Lenny, but did either of y'all see that sort of materializing? Was that surprising?
It was surprising. I didn't see that coming.
I saw it a mile away. I did. And like we addressed.
Oh my gosh. No, but
I did.
Get out of here.
Listen, I did.
Somebody,
listen.
Hey, where's our producer, Lead Racky? Pull the plug on him.
Listen, okay. So listen, here's the deal, y'all. And this is not new. Like, there are so many time travel stories, science fiction novels, films, everything. So many of them that deal with the concept of people trying to change something and ultimately wind up causing it. And that's one thing about it where it's like, I don't know if it's, the sheer magnitude of science fiction stories that I've seen with that as one of its fundamental sort of concepts, but every single time that a character, out of time is setting out to stop a thing, my mind automatically goes to, you're going to wind up causing it because you are setting out to stop this
well,
thing.
I guess a question then is, when did you see that? Because it's one thing to end episode 5 and Adam sends Jonas into the future and you'd be like, oh no, Michael's going to commit suicide, or he's going to talk him into it. Like, was it Claudia doing her bit in the library? Like, how do you print this? Like, did you say, oh, she's going to kill her dad?
No, it wasn't that early. Honestly, the scene when I remember sort of thinking and notating it was when they're in the car together. That was when they're driving in the car, and I kind of picked up on at that point, like, oh, she's actively like trying to keep him away from the apartment. She's trying to like intervene. She wants him to move out of that place. She wants him to live with her. Like, all of those things were starting to sort of gel for me. I was like, I don't know what's about to happen. Now, honestly, so I did not know exactly how everything was going to play out. I did not know that necessarily she was going to accidentally cause the death. I thought maybe, she was going to somehow start a ripple effect. Maybe somebody else was going to kill him, or maybe, I didn't see coming that they were going to scuffle and then that was what was going to cause his death. But I absolutely thought, okay, yeah, she in the process of this is basically going to cause his death. So when he has those big bug eyes in the apartment and it's like, why are you really here? Like, when he has that reaction, that's when it all solidified. I was like, oh, they're going to scuffle, and he's either going to fall and hit his head, or somebody's going to bring out a weapon, and that's how he's going to die.
Well, you know what, Reed? You are the white devil.
Man, maybe. I don't know, y'all.
Did you just call me white devil? Anyone know where that's from? Ace Ventura.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
it's been so long,
man.
I'm failing on my pop culture references tonight. Now, did you also pick up though that I'm sure Reed did, but Vera, did you pick up that the scene in the apartment between Claudia and Egon recontextualizes why old lady Claudia apologizes to 53 Egon?
Yes,
I don't know if you put that together, but yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I really like Time Witch Claudia, like future
Time
lady.
Witch Claudia.
That's a great designation.
Don't mess with her.
One of my problems with this show is that I don't have any real names for people, as I call them all by what I think of them in my head.
Now, we chronologically, which is fitting for this show, skipped over this scene, but we did reference it earlier. Let's unpack for a second. So, I am so grateful that, and Vera, last time you were on, you said his name. It's not in front of me, so apologies. But the actor who plays mid-age Ulrich, that he got episode 6 of this season when he got to like flirt and just be a dude living in the world, right? You know, at his anniversary party and you know, flirting with Hannah, which is not great, but at least the actor had something to do when he wasn't straight jacketed or drooling or beaten to a bloody pulp. Like this poor dude.
Yeah.
He is this scene. So Reed references earlier, Hannah, you know, absconds with EJ's time travel device just because she can't, you know, it's just sitting right there. I mean, what are you going to do? Goes back in time to 53 and tells 53 Egon, my husband is missing. I saw this news clipping. I think it's him, and confronts him. And, you know, poor dude is just desperate. And she says, if you could choose to, the minute she said this opening line, I was like, holy cow, I can't believe this character. And she said, if you could choose today between Katerina and me, I tried to remember if you ever said I love you to me. I mean, now I won't disagree that she's a wretched, she behaves wretchedly. However, I will at least pivot a little bit here. There are characters in shows historically, I think specifically of Julie Taylor in Friday Night Lights or Kim Bauer in 24, that you even get the feeling the show just kind of doesn't know what the crap to do with the characters, so they give them all these terrible storylines, and it's like, what are you doing? At least with Hannah, I feel like I dislike her because she's so conniving, and that at least is interesting character work. I don't know, to me.
No, I don't disagree.
I think that I can't remember that actor's name either. I call him Budget Mads Mikkelsen.
He is. He's like diet Mads Mikkelsen. He is.
Yeah.
He really is. Yes.
This B-movie, Mads Mikkelsen.
Sir, if you happen to upon hearing this show, I apologize on behalf of my two co-hosts right now. I think you're the man, even though I can't say your name and it's not in front of me. But carry on.
I don't know who you are.
I'm sure he feels much better.
Right. He feels very loved right now.
Yeah, I think that part of the reason that I don't like her, and I think that the show has done a good job in doing this, is that because you see her in multiple timelines, you see her in the past and you see her in the 2020, I guess the year is present, and she doesn't really grow as a person during that time. Like she's always she has like a complex about who she is, and she doesn't like who she is, and she wants to be one of the cool kids. And when she's a kid, you feel bad for her. But as she grows into adult, she never grows out of it. And she's always stuck in that mind state. And so she doesn't experience any growth as a person. And that's what makes her so kind of despicable, because she's still out for revenge, and she's still out to show the cool kids that she can be better than them and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I totally agree. And I think that's part of what's difficult, is because her motivations, even as a character, are so self-absorbed, and they're so oriented around just her own desires and what she wants to see happen.
They're childish.
Yeah, they're very, very childish. And so that's what makes it all ultimately quite frustrating.
Yeah.
I do love, you know, in another Nathanism, I love that everyone is just so casual with the time machines. Like, Katerina sees it courtesy of Magnus, and y'all, the image I got was like Homer Simpson with a plate of donuts. Like, the way she grabs that time machine and just kind of excuses herself real furtively out of the room, like she's going to the bathroom to read Sudoku or something. You know, like it's like, y'all, holy cow. The level of familiarity everyone all of a sudden has with just time travel is just hysterical to me.
I have just one more thing that I really want to bring up about this. It going back to the very, very beginning of it, but this is kind of my final note on it. This was actually my favorite episode of season 2. I loved the opening shots where everybody's kind of like, I don't know if you remember, but everybody is in a frame, and then they're looking off to the distance and seeing a version of someone that they're haunted by. Like Katerina sees Mikkel sitting in the chair,
but it's an apparition. Yeah,
exactly. Yes, they're not really there, but and Adam is seeing Martha across the chair. Like I just really loved that. I thought that was I thought that said a lot about the characters and their current states of mind, and so yeah, I loved that opening shot, and so I just didn't want to leave the episode before talking about it. But that's the last note that I have on episode 7 specifically. I just
feel like Elder Jonas is just like taking back the teen years he didn't get due to being swept up in time travel stuff. He's just laying around his parents' house. He's breaking into other folks' houses, he's just talking crap about his elders, which is Adam. He just does nothing.
That's something that in Winden they seem to do a lot, is everybody just kind of walks into everybody else's house like it's
they do.
Thing to do.
All right. Well, I do think this episode ends pretty strong with the Teen Jonas and White Devil Claudia scene. Like that's a really really potent scene. Any last notes on 7, Vera? I'm sorry, Reed. Go ahead.
No, it's great. It's great. Like Elder Claudia showed him, and now he's showing younger Claudia, and it's just I do love the way that they utilize the time travel to cause character collisions. It's it's really, really nice.
All right, so let's jump into episode 8. It's called Endings and Beginnings, which is an inversion of the first episode's title, which is Beginnings and Endings. All right, Reed, come on. No way. Like, if you called this, I'm going to start calling you Guinan, which I believe is Whoopi Goldberg's character in Star Trek Next Generation, because she's like clairvoyant or something, right? Like, no way. Were you at least mildly surprised by the identity of Charlotte's mother?
Oh, I was stunned. I didn't see that coming at all. Like, I mean, no, seriously. Like, I was.
What kind of person would you have to be to see that coming?
I know. I mean, like, there's a very specific element to my like. It's like I keep telegraphing it to you guys. When a character goes to try to stop a thing, they will ultimately cause it. It's not that hard of a pattern to pick up. But like, no, randomly be like, oh my gosh, so Charlotte's mother is her daughter. Like that's a Ray Stevens song, man. That is not. Like I can't even.
Elizabeth is her own grandmother.
I know, exactly. I know. Oh my gosh, it's just
she
insane.
Is her own bootstrap paradox.
She is.
What's funny, Reed, is all this season when we've been talking about, or rather, when we've been talking about this season, and you keep alluding to everyone being each other and or themselves. I'm like, you have no idea where this is going with Charlotte's mom. This is going to be mind blowing. I mean, I don't know how you pay this off or don't.
Oh man!
But in terms of pure ballsiness of plotting, I was like, didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I didn't. No way. I mean, it's that, and it harkens back to something that you've referenced a couple of times about like why Elizabeth was not kidnapped and stuff like that. It's like, okay, yeah, that makes, and those dots clicked into place for me right now to where like you had said earlier, oh, so Elizabeth was not kidnapped and here's why, but I didn't know what connection that had to everything, and so yeah, it all makes sense now.
Think about how creepy that is that Noah sees her as a little girl, doesn't kidnap her because eventually he's going to have a child with her.
Mm-hmm. That's just weird.
Yeah.
Well, that ain't right.
I mean, it actually, I did not finish this book, and nor did I see the movie, but it reminds me a little bit of The Time Traveler's Wife. Did either of y'all read that? Or what?
I saw the movie, but to be honest, it was painfully forgettable for me. I thought it was fine.
I attempted to watch the movie and fell asleep several times and then gave up.
Well, but it's that kind of idea, like the husband, or I honestly don't remember enough about the story, but he comes back at various sort of eras of what would be the wife's life. So, and I wouldn't disagree that it is creepy. Elder Noah, it's like, oh my God, but it does click into place by the end where it's young Noah that makes eyes at Elizabeth and it's like, oh, that's kind of a cool locking into place, that narrative. We can kind of come back to this maybe in thematics, but I do love the scene, although it's hard for me in my limited intellectual capacity to understand exactly what effect it has. But I love the scene with Teen Jonas and 80s Claudia in the cave. And just the line, he says, we're changing a grain of sand and with it the whole world. It's like, that's pretty awesome. But for a momentary digression here, I'm asking y'all the question. I'm not going to just ramble. That's not what I mean. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not positive I am here, that the show posits it's immutable. So as heroic as we can sort of feel in the moment of Jonas doing this, the rules that the show occasionally explicitly, but pretty implicitly establish is it's solid. The timeline is immutable because even there's a line Elder Jonas, much as I dislike him in season 2, says to Katerina, I believe, when she's challenging him, you go back and get Mikkel. He says, I can't. The past is the past or something, but he says, I can't die because effectively I have to become Adam. And that's, the timeline stops at Adam. All these characters' timelines currently stop at Adam. And so whatever's beyond him is new chronology. Anyway, my point being is, am I excited about that line, even though it ultimately means nothing because the apocalypse still happens. We know the future is a barren wasteland from Teen Jonas visiting it.
I think that, and this might come more into play in themes, but there is a theory that was posited by Nietzsche about eternal recurrence. Have you come across anything about that?
I wouldn't be able to unpack it. I've heard the term before, but I wouldn't have the substance behind.
So it's a cyclical view of time in which like the current reality is finite, and then it'll begin again, and it's a cycle that repeats an infinite number of times. So Adam might be the end of the timeline, and then it goes back and starts at the beginning again. Anyway, does that make sense?
Yeah. I just can't tell. It is difficult for me to wrap my brain around what we're supposed to kind of understand about what these characters' actions mean, if anything. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's hard for me to know because what they sort of establish, I think, explicitly in some places is if you've seen it occur, we the viewer, I mean, it occurred. And thus, nothing will change it. In other words, things like Hannah goes back to 53 with a time machine because she always went back to 53 with a time machine. And thus, presumably, she stays there on into whenever, perhaps having some sort of affair with Egon Tiedemann and maybe mothering Claudia. No, Claudia's already born. But point being, like, it happened. We saw it happen, thus it happened. And thus does Jonas's and Claudia's sort of little hero moment in the cave amount to much of anything? I don't know. I'm just sort of. I feel like I'm about to be patchy. My eye's about to pop out of my skull.
Well, and that's the whole conundrum of the idea of time travel is that, if you cannot escape that loop, if you can't escape that cycle, then season 3 is either going to present something that concludes this final cycle with something that Adam does, like you said, Nathan, like it all ends with Adam. It's either going to conclude with something that Adam does, or they are going to find some way to change the equation just enough that it diverges into something different. The reason that the parallel world excited me is because that's a wild card. If there is a parallel world, which we're kind of hopping all over the place, I guess we can kind of unpack something that happens towards the end of this episode, although there's much more to talk about it. But I keep referencing this parallel world idea. Something, I won't get into details right now because maybe that'll come up later, but something happens to Martha. Something bad happens to Martha, and it happens in front of young Jonas. Now, seconds after this bad thing happens to Martha, young Jonas is distraught. He doesn't quite know what to do with himself, and then in walks Martha. But like, as Nathan called her, like better hair Martha. Like she's very
Martha with the new hair, which is a Beyonce reference. Go ahead.
Martha with the new hair. I don't listen to Beyonce, but
You should.
I should. So yeah, Martha with the new hair walks in, and that indicates that there is an alternate reality with different occurrences, different situations, scenarios, everything. And if there's one, then there's any number of them. And if there's any number of them, then Adam could be Jonas, but from a totally different place. He could have gone through a total different set of experiences, like all kinds of different things. And that's why that ending excited me, is because if it is this endless loop, then I was in store for a season 3 of like, everybody's just going to keep going back and forth and causing things that I see coming a mile away.
Wow.
And all that. But I mean, like, I'm being jovial, but like,
sure.
Honestly, if it is this back and forth looping, then yeah, there's not
Jeremy
really,
Bearimy.
Yeah, there's not really anywhere to go from there. But if it's a parallel situation, then we have some options, because maybe those futures aren't written in the same way, or maybe, one impacts the destiny of another in ways that could be actually changed. And so that's why that teaser at the end with Martha with the new hair actually did sort of excite me about what they do with season 3. Again, season 3 is only going to have, however many episodes, but that's it. They have announced season 3 is it.
Right.
So if season 3 ends on some version of mysterious, like, we don't know, then I will be terribly frustrated at that point, because I'll be like, well, this was all you got. Like, this was all they gave you. Like, wrap up the story somehow. So hopefully they can do it. Hopefully they've got a landing point.
Well, and I think it's so funny that Losky's coming up here, but like, I think A Thing Dark doesn't, because of its compact nature, and what A Thing Dark does fine, but not as well at its best as Lost did, is the character stuff. And so what I think annoys me, or annoys is strong, what chances or perhaps frustrates me about Martha with the new hair is I'm not sure what I wanted out of this show was extra dimensional bebopping, right? Like I was like, well, I think these characters are really interesting, and their sort of stories entwining whatever is fascinating to me, but I'm worried about how much more unwieldy can this go, because, and Reed, I debunked myself after I said this and watched subsequent episodes, but remember how you were scratching your head or frustrated about EJ in the bunker referencing Adam with no correlation to himself? Well, at the moment,
frustrated by that.
Well, he does end up, by the end of the season, referencing Adam in relation to himself, I think. But in the moment, I didn't remember that. And so if you go back and listen to it, I posit the possibility of a third option. That was, are one or both of them deposits from another dimension, because I knew it ends with something else. But at the same time, like, you just said something that was interesting and could be cool if it were the case of, is Adam from here or not? But at the same time, you referenced the beginning of episode 7 with the apparitions. What he sees is the Martha we know. And so why Golden Snitch Martha bothered me is, it's like, oh my gosh, like that's like a whole new world to invest in, which has an excitement factor to it. But I'm still so like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
The thing that bothers me about it is that I'm still waiting for them to find the loophole that breaks the cycle of the 33-year cycle that just repeats itself until the apocalyptic event happens that resets it, we're assuming. And it feels like the introduction of Multiverse Martha is like a Deus Ex Machina. Like,
Deus Ex Martha.
Yeah. like she comes and it's like, oh, there's a whole other universe and a whole parallel reality, and it's like, and listen, the writers of the show have like bought enough good faith that of course I'm going to keep watching it and I'm still enjoying it. I'm sure they can do things with it that I don't expect. But where we are right now and where we end off, it just feels kind of convenient for them to bring that in.
I mean, I'm not going to argue too much with that. I see that point, even despite my enjoying it more than you did. I don't disagree. And I think really it's just going to come down to what season 3 gives us and how they stick the landing, and whether or not they substantiate this with new exciting plot threads, or if it's ultimately inconsequential.
Well, and I think, remember that feeling. It happens predominantly in season 1 and then ticks up again in season 2 of like when you're introduced to a new timeline and you're like, oh, I remember that first feeling when they jumped to 86 with Mikkel in like episode 2. Like, oh, wow. Oh, didn't know that's what this show was. That's
right.
That's exciting. And then, 6 episodes later, you jump back to 53 and it's like, what? Whoa, whoa, it's so much bigger. Oh my gosh. And then episode 1 of season 2, it's in 1921. Wow, oh my gosh, I'm patchy now. And so that has an excitement factor, but you've got diminishing returns at a certain point, right? It's like,
right.
Okay, y'all, you've set a pretty big table here. We need to eat at some point, Right. And so, and it sounds like I'm thrilled that you loved it and were excited about it. And like, sincerely, that's not me pacifying, because I was left scratching my head being like, doggone, I don't know if I can hold all this anymore. Like, what does this all mean? Anyway, I'm curious. I'm not as excited to see all of this because I feel like there's so much unanswered remaining. But again, who knows? It could. I don't want us to drift too far from this though, because even in discussing where the season lands, we haven't really unpacked that final sequence, which I want to, kind of volley the ball up in the air for Reed to spike it some, because I think you got really jazzed by it. Like the final, as much as I'm sort of struggling with some of the creative choices, with some of the like big picture 1,000,000-foot view choices, I still think creatively this show is really exciting. I mean, the scripting is great, the acting is great, the casting is great, the production value is great, even the effects when they decide to use them are well deployed. And so,
yes,
kind of y'all speak outside of just Multiverse Martha. Like, how did you feel about the final kind of, run leading up to that finale?
What do you think, Vera?
I really liked the time machine opening in all the dimensions at once, or I guess in one of them it's the gate, but in 2 of them it's the time machine opening, and I like that that's kind of what activates the apocalypse, I guess, is what's happening. And then it creates like the portal, which is cool.
Will you be specific? Because I'm a little confused.
No.
Because
Sorry, no, I will not be specific.
I was like, okay.
No, figure it out, Nathan. You smart cookie.
Oh man, this show, my friends are beating me up. Goodness gracious.
Sorry.
Like what machines are you referring to?
Oh, so when Clausen opens the drum with the waste.
Oh, right, yes.
Then in the future, Elizabeth turns on the time machine, and then in 1921, Magnus and what's her face do.
Yep.
Oh, right, the God particle. Okay, right.
Yeah.
In my head, I was picturing the suitcase time machine. I was like, no, Hannah's flirting with Egon right about now, and that's sitting by her feet.
The dark matter blob.
Yes.
It activates and forms the portal, and that's when you see Elizabeth looking through to Charlotte.
Right.
That was great.
Yeah, that was a great moment.
And there's so many great things. No, it's okay. There's so many great things happening in that sequence as well, because something that Dark does almost so often that it is a bit silly is there are montage sequences with, usually underneath a compelling musical choice of some version. I sent Nathan a note that he didn't quite catch the reference for until after he had rewatched the episode, but I just sent him a note just saying, "My Body is a Cage" is like one of my favorite songs. That's just such an awesome song.
I think it is a funny story, because I think what you said is is my favorite song of theirs or something like that. You reference
that it's one of my favorite, of
theirs,
one of my favorite songs, yeah.
And I know it as an Arcade Fire song, and I was like, well, that's a pretty random. One of my favorite songs of theirs is this. And so that was my reply. I was like, yeah, I love City with No Children. And that was it.
Arcade Fire.
Yeah. And the next day, I'm watching the episode. I was like, oh, that's what Reed was talking about.
That's why. Yeah, so at any rate, like, I really loved in this episode towards the end, you're seeing all of those different portals swirling around. You're seeing everything sort of go chaotic. You're seeing also just everybody entering into their respective spaces, and underneath all of it is taking place underneath My Body as a Cage. Specifically, not the Arcade Fire version, but the Peter Gabriel cover of it. But it was just really compelling. Everything about what was happening. Now, at that point, something that had happened at the end that I did not see coming at all. Never saw, like, no way I would have predicted this until, like, seconds before it happened, was Adam shooting Martha. Like, that, that was not on my radar at all until he literally, when he pointed the gun up at them and said, you know, I'm the trigger and I'm going to do the thing that turns me into me. I forget his exact line, but he basically is like, I'm going to do the thing that makes me become me. That is the moment that I knew, like, oh crap, he's going to shoot Martha right now.
Right.
So I never saw that coming. I was pretty shocked by that little wrinkle. I was like, and that has some pretty far-reaching implications to, Adam. The show does not give me any reason to disbelieve other than Elder Jonas's psychological denial of it. The show does not give me any reason to disbelieve that Adam is in fact Jonas, but man, he would have had to have gone through some stuff to go from we're perfect for each other, don't let anybody tell you differently, to I'm gonna shoot you in cold blood to send me down this other path.
And
that's just
I like
awful.
the callback to what one of the Jonai said earlier. I can't remember which one.
It's the Jonas
Awesome.
Brothers.
One of the Jonas Brothers, yeah. Kevin, if you're going to pick one.
I don't even know the Jonas Brothers.
Says that perhaps I can stop myself from becoming me. I can't remember if it's episode 7 or 8, but one of them says that. It must be
That sounds like a
Elder
Teen
Jonas.
Jonas thing to say. Oh.
I don't know. Maybe.
Well, because I think
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Elder Jonas says to Katerina when she's pressing him on going back to get Mikkel, says, no, it is what it is. I become Adam. You can't kill me. Maybe he doesn't say I become him, but as in he says, I can't die because I must become Adam, or something like that.
You're right. So it is young Jonas. So anyway, he says that because he still has hope, whereas
right.
Adam is kind of the fully formed version of Jonas who's like, no, there is no hope. And so he does what he needs to become him.
And it's important to note there that, this may seem obvious, but like, take Jonas as a singular character. You have young Jonas, you've got Elder Jonas, and then you've got Adam Jonas. But Elder Jonas, at the moment that he leaves, uses the time machine and jumps somewhere with the rest of the crew, he does not know at that moment that Martha is not still in the bunker that he put her in. He may presume that based on time is immutable and it's all just going to play out the way that it played out, that she somehow made it out. But the Elder Jonas's last interaction with Martha was putting her in the bunker and saying, stay here, like, don't leave. And I think that was perhaps his attempt, vain as it must have been, to keep her safe and keep her from dying and hopefully keep him from becoming this Adam figure. And it is interesting to note that middle-aged version of him has no way of knowing yet that he has failed. And I do find that interesting.
Well, I do wonder too, because you're right, Reed. It's funny when you get granular on this show and figure out why an individual character is doing a thing, you can sort of track it back somewhere. And because who the hell knows? I don't know. I was about to posit a thing. I'm like, I don't know. But I do agree with you that I think that is Elder Jonas's Hail Mary, which is a sports reference, right? When he throws Martha in the bunker. But okay, that's what it was. What do we make of this note young Noah gives Elder Jonas, right? That he says is from Martha, and then Jonas reads like, that's impossible. Right? Do you remember this?
Yeah, but so refresh my memory. Do we see what that note says?
No.
Yeah, we don't.
No, that's my point. Right.
I was sitting. Do you know how many times I watched this episode and I was like, did I forget did they show it to us and I forgot what they said? Because there's so many people like Noah reacting to the last pages of the chapter, and I was like, did we see what that said, or did he just react to it? So I had a momentary lapse of memory where I was like, wait a minute, did we see? Okay, so yeah, I don't know, maybe. And I think part of the difficulty of capsulating this is inherently an incomplete story.
Right.
Kind of, I forget which one of you had said that earlier, but season 1 is at least, although there's an epilogue scene of sorts where Jonas is in the future, there's at least some cohesion to the overall main narrative that's happening. Lots of little dangling threads, but the main narrative is kind of done. The apocalypse happens in season 2, so I guess, yes, it has one too, but it feels so much bigger and feels like it is more tattered at the end of season 2 than it is season 1. And that's coming from somebody who actively liked the ending of season 2. But it does
more
feel
deliberately a cliffhanger than season 1 is.
Yes, I agree. Because I feel like they are intentionally and I don't know when they knew that they were going to be renewed for 3. But it does feel very much like we're going to save all of this for the eventual conclusion. Tune in next week. Same bat time. Same bat channel. You're going
to have to rewatch all of this to know what on earth is happening at any given moment. And even then, you'll be scratching your head wondering, what am I watching?
Exactly.
I do love, and sort of maybe even my final note here before any y'all and other theme stuff, but I do love the visual of During My Body Is a Cage with Katerina in the cave and the time dust is leading her.
That's great shot.
Pretty epic. Well, and I guess what's hard and maybe a little disheartening, because I do feel kind of dumb not being able to suss this stuff out, but like I can't tell if the show season 2 is positing there is a thing that can be done to break this loop. You know what I'm saying? Characters talk about the potential for that thing, but the show itself, it does not feel like it makes a decisive statement that a thing could be done to break this loop. Right. Because, like where we're left, Multiverse Martha is the only wild card in what feels like there are other wild cards. In other words, Elder Jonas ports away with Bartosz and Magnus and Franziska. Things like Elizabeth and Charlotte, kind of E.T. and Elliotting across time. If you recall, we have precedent for that with Teen Jonas and Helga in season 1, and they get shunted to opposite ends of the time stream, right?
Right.
Because 19 Jonas and 86 Helga get thrown to the future and 53. So right. I don't know. I guess I'm more like, well, what happened to... I don't know. I think there's something interesting about that final sort of reach across time thing that I'm like, oh, that's okay. Guess did that cause the bubble to form over Winden and then the apocalypse? Does the future apocalypse, is it just Winden? Because does it not give you that kind of that impression?
It does, but Winden as our world in this show is Winden. There is we don't even know where Clausen came from. Like, he doesn't even cite, Winden is such a closed system in the fictional world of this show. So honestly, this is not a dismissal of your question, but the apocalypse might as well just be Winden. Because this whole show is just Winden. Like, they don't care what's going on beyond this town in the slightest. At least the story doesn't. At least not yet. So that's why
I do feel like once I finish season 2, I may have even read something that was postulating, is it some sort of petri dish kind of civilization that we're watching. But anyway, whatever.
Well, I didn't have any more specific notes about any of the details of the episodes. Did anybody have any specific prominent themes that stood out to them that they felt particularly galvanized by wanting to speak about?
There's something that I wanted to mention, just because I don't think it falls under themes, but it's kind of a thread that happens throughout both seasons of the show, and that's the symbolism of color in dark.
Huh.
Have you guys noticed any of that? I think yellow is the most prominent one that pops up.
Which is
but
Jonas's raincoat.
Yeah, there's 3 colors
And
that pop up
drums.
really consistently. So, it's blue, yellow, and red, which are the primary colors, right? And they come up a lot. And I noticed yellow mostly because you have the drums, you have the suits, the radioactive suits.
Right.
Jonas's raincoat, the doors of the school are yellow. Agnes sometimes wears yellow. Agnes is Ulrich's mom.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The cassette in Mads.
Well, technically, Agnes is Tranta's mom, who is Ulrich's father, but yes.
Jeremy Bearby.
Right, whatever.
Hannah's massage table's yellow. There's an umbrella that's yellow. Red, there's a coin. There's red paths throughout the caves in Winden. Red lipstick. There's a red dress at some point. I think Agnes again. Claudia Tiedemann sometimes wears red as a child. And then blue, the wallpaper in the bunker. Jenna Nielsen has blue sweaters. Tronta Nielsen wears blue. Agnes sometimes wears blue. So, like, those 3 colors.
Well, and Jonas's, I noticed this. It's funny you say that because I noticed this. Teen Jonas's final appearance with Claudia in the caves, he is no longer in his yellow jacket, but is in a blue jacket.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
I happened to notice that. I wasn't thinking about it in the broader context of colors, except that it was a noticeably different look for him.
So,
interesting. Those 3
colors on the color wheel are evenly spaced. And that's called triadic harmony of color. And I just thought it was really interesting that they had the symbolism of the color throughout the show. There's 3 of the colors. They're evenly spaced on the color wheel, just as time in the show is evenly spaced 33 years apart is how the cycle runs. I just thought it was another kind of interesting layer that the show has been.
Think, too, about Claudia's heterochromia with her different eye colors.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so...
Whoa. I feel like,
Dark got
Reed,
deep.
I feel like in the recording of this episode, in the final published edition, you should have the theme music playing in the background right now, because I feel like we just jumped into Winden real quick. Like, Vera just took us to a little German church. She's like, by the way, these are the guiding principles of this world.
Here's all the things. Yeah, and they have to, or I would imagine they would. I shouldn't say they have to. I would imagine they are connected to either a motivation, like a hint at a motivation, or some sort of symbolic representation of, you know, the light versus the darkness. Because what I can't get over, although doggone if I know what it's trying to say, is how overt so much of the religious language is in so much of this season. But it's very difficult for me to grasp exactly what it's trying to scratch at, because I can't even, by the end of season 2, tell whether Claudia or Adam are the real bad guys. Like, they definitely are, like, which one is the bad guy, good guy? Are they both bad guys? Are they both good guys? Like, the motivations and intentions are so muddled, it's very difficult to grasp exactly what the show is trying to say with all of it. It's telling a very interesting story, I feel, but it's difficult for me to grab hold of what it's trying to say through all of it. Through it's very deliberate, as you've already unpacked for us, Vera. It's very deliberate production design, even right down to the colors of objects and clothing that people are wearing. So it's got to be very intentional, and intentionality usually has purpose and meaning behind it, but it's very difficult for me at this stage to grasp what that might be or what the show's trying to say.
Yeah, there's a lot more threads that are left dangling at the end of this season. And I feel like a lot of the characters, not that they're not fully realized, but their intentions aren't fully realized yet. And so we kind of just have to guess at what it is. And that's one of the things I actually kind of like about the show. Like, I didn't see Claudia killing her dad coming because I liked Time Witch Claudia so much as a person. And I thought she was the good guy that was going to help break the cycle of time, and ends up contributing to it again.
Well, but I do think, and, I think all of these touch on thematic ideas. But to me, I do think what's interesting about the Claudia character, in a way that, Vera, you were outlining earlier, doesn't happen for Hannah, at least not as of yet. Who knows? She may be our Jaime Lannister of this show, but ultimately. But I do think what's interesting and makes Claudia an interesting character writ large, not any lone iteration, is the repentance, basically. Is the, however, quote unquote, wicked we may ascribe her intentions in, not maybe intending to kill her dad at the outset, but definitely not saving him with real intentionality there. I do think there's great remorse as seen through Time Witch Claudia's confession, kind of subconscious or subliminal confession to 53 Egon, which is, again, her going to her death right after that happens chronologically for her. But anyway, the point being, like, I'm kind of with you, Reed. There's disappointment's the wrong word, perhaps, but it will be a little bit of a jarring effect if Adam is not, quote unquote, the bad guy.
Sure, right.
But again, I don't know. And the intentionality of the production design and the things that are super strong about the show make me not distrust where 3 can go. I'm just on less sure footing than I was. At the same time, there are probably things occurring in 2 that I'm not even really picking up on and won't be real clear until 3. I feel like I'm circling back away from theme. I don't mean to be doing that.
No, that's okay. I mean, you touched on something right there that I would like to bring up, and we can unpack it for as long as we want to. I know we're already kind of running aground of time in general, but
aren't we all, Jeremy Berry?
All right, aren't we all
running aground of time?
Yeah,
the beginning
really
is the
will.
end.
It's so true. But I did find it interesting. Though I've called out multiple times in these recordings that it frustrated me from a writing perspective and from just the generalized storytelling perspective, that Jonas and Adam have different names, that they are actively, like Adam is actively, presumably, causing the things that will turn Jonas into him, but he has adopted... See, there's just no way for us to know. He's adopted a new name, and that new name, wherever it came from, has created a disassociated identity within him as he's telling his younger self, I'm you, but never refers to himself as such. And then the younger and elder Jonas are both sitting there still referring to him as Adam, as this disconnected being. And I do find it interesting, and I don't have a ton to say about it, but it's an interesting thought to just sort of plant some seeds and allow them to grow as they will, that if we have some window into who we are becoming or how we are, like I keep going back, let me get real practical about this. I keep really go back to that phrase where people will say, oh, I saw your true colors, or, your true colors are showing, or something like, this is who they really are. And I had a conversation with somebody it was at work, and it was totally not about Dark, because none of my work friends watch Dark. But I was having this conversation with them, and we were talking about some frustrations with certain, like, team members, not within our specific building, but just people we have to work with and people we have to collaborate with to get to accomplish certain tasks. And they just have, these other people just have a very different way of doing things. They're very brash in their communication. They're very terse, sometimes just plain rude in the way that they address people and speak to people. And the conversation that I was having with my friends, we were talking about different levels of how if you just listen to somebody, they'll tell you who they are. Like, if you'll just listen to the way a person is, they could feel this way or they could feel that way, but they will tell you who they are. What really drives them will come out through the course of interaction. And so I find it interesting to think about this version of Adam that supposedly has grown from being so lovelorn that he will still tell his known aunt, "We're perfect together, don't let anybody tell you differently," growing into somebody who will openly shoot her just to cause some inevitable sort of chain of events. And where again, I don't have a cohesive thought on this. It's just an interesting sort of rabbit trail for me to follow. Is that notion of the ways we will suddenly see or will react in ways that surprise ourselves, or something will make us very mad or sad, and then we'll be stuck in this place of like, I don't feel like myself. I don't feel, or I feel like I'm losing myself. And those kind of conversations just fascinate me, because I'm like, are these just shadows of what is really there? And the circumstances are affecting them or bringing them out in weird ways? Or are you actively changing? Is it really that this is who you have been this entire time, but circumstances push you this way or that way? Or is there active change happening in your heart? Are you essentially, was Adam always Jonas, or did Jonas truly become an Adam? And I do find it interesting that their names are different. Is this that I'm trying to scratch at? Does it make sense where I'm going with these kind of things?
Yes, and I do think, one, it's not a deficiency of the show, it's an active choice they've made. There's so much we're not given.
Yeah, of course.
Between kind of 30-year-old Jonas and 60-year-old Adam or so.
Yeah.
A couple of thoughts there. One, I understand it being a hang-up, but I do think it's worth noting in terms of the character nomenclature there, Jonas, Adam, like the superstructure of the show has, as part of its through line, Adam needing this old cycle to complete itself as and young Jonas says to Claudia, he's trying to start a new world. I want us to save the one we have. And so the name Adam has a Genesis appropriation to it, ushering he and, whoever else is in 1921 with him into this whole new life cycle, world cycle, who on earth knows. Something that I feel like you're also scratching at, Reed, that, or at least it feels like it is, or what you're saying makes me think of, that isn't a pivot away and hopefully is just a layering on top of. David Gushee, whom I referenced frequently at the top of 2018, in a recent Facebook blog post, coined this phrase that haunts me for how resonant and also terrifying it is. And the phrase is, that's come up in our home multiple times as my wife and I talk, character is destiny. And I just am so quake underneath the power of that idea, that who you are determines who you will be. And that's such an elusive, well, what does that mean? Well, right. Yeah. Let's talk about that, I guess. But and I think what you're trying to scratch at is the character we see of young and even elder Jonas feels at odds with the destiny, it seems, of him becoming Adam.
Right.
And that's all I'm saying in terms of we there's so little we have to go on between those eras. But even divorcing that from the TV show Dark, this notion of character as destiny is a really haunting idea, right? That who we are is who we'll perpetually be, which sounds nihilistic or fatalistic. I also think it can be kind of hopeful in the sense that maybe maybe this is me layering hopefulness upon it, you can, with time and development and formation, massage your character into what will then be destined. Does that make any sense at all? In other words, character doesn't have to be a static thing, or exist in this amber state that is always like, if you've got quote unquote bad character, it doesn't mean that for eternity you're going to perpetually make bad choices, thus your destiny is bad. But that takes work and effort and time and intentionality and whatever. Anyway, I'm just sort of responding to what it feels like you're saying.
Yeah, it makes sense. Vera, do you have any specific responses or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that one of the themes, and I think it's especially evident with the Jonases and Adam, is identity, as you've both mentioned, and how it persists over time and how it changes over time. So Nathan, as you're saying that, like, your character doesn't have to be static and you don't always have to be who you always are or will become. And I think that if any of us were to go back and look at our younger self, we've probably come a long way from where we were in our teenage years or even 20s. And we've changed a lot. And since then, we have become more of ourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Right. And right now where we are not fully who we will become. And so I think that Adam, either in trying to start a new timeline or whatever his intentions are that we don't clearly know, he may or may not be trying to either fully become who he is or to avoid becoming what he has become, because he is the most fully realized identity in the show of the character of Jonas, because he has had all the identities previous to him.
Right.
Does that make sense? The way that it was described to me was, at any given point in time, we are like a slice of bread. But if we were to look at a 4D version of our life, we would be the full loaf.
Oh,
you're calling me a loaf?
You had a lot of candy at Halloween. I'm just saying.
I do like that analogy, though, and I do like bread. Well, and a phrase that kind of popped into my head, Vera, as you were saying that, was, we are constantly becoming who we are.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying and beautiful at the same time. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because all of the aggregation of our thoughts and intentions and wills and desires and apathy and optimism and defeat and victory all conspire to form the us we are continuing to grow into being, which is, I think, maybe a lovely thought if I know exactly what I'm saying, which I'm not sure I do.
Right. And we are only a piece of all that has been and all that will be of us, what exists currently.
Right.
It's interesting. I was, as I often do, and Reed, who often shares conversation with me, and Vera, you who might listen to our conversations know, spending a lot of time this year in the works and thoughts of Richard Rohr, and one of the episodes of Another Name for Everything, they're fielding listener questions. And there's just this really lovely, freeing notion, and that I think I'll speak for myself and what little I know of Reed. Vera, don't totally know your sort of church backstory per se, but, those of us used to a more traditionalized version of church would probably balk against, at least our former selves, perhaps. And that's, someone writes in, and it's an adult, and he's referencing his spouse and how, and he is learning and growing and experiencing great richness of, spiritual formation through the teachings of Rohr, but this is creating conflict in his marital relationship. And that specifically his wife, the language the husband relays is, she says, all I ever needed, I learned from the Bible in kindergarten, or something like that. I'm being slightly reductive, but not totally. Like, that's what he says is her articulation. And Rohr just really kind of compassionately sinks his teeth into that a little bit and just says, like, that's actually really bad. Like that's not, we are constantly maturing. or should be rather. And it was really lovely to me because it kind of, Reed, you and I have talked about on the show occasionally about marriage and how like the best version of what one's marriage can and maybe should be is when you're able to kind of like disattach yourself from your spouse, and meaning looking at them as a fully formed individual that isn't necessarily required to be in relation to you, and that like then you can really admire them they are. And in the context of, you know, this questioner of Rohr's, he was positing this notion of the loveliness of being able to say, oh, like, to not be afraid of maturity, to not be afraid of development, to not be afraid of becoming more who we are than we currently are. And, you know, like, oh, spouse, your new hobby is a little different and unfamiliar to what was, but it's you, and you're thriving and you're growing, and it's fascinating you, and it's bringing you to life. And thus, however different it might be from what was, I encourage and nurture and should support this. Does that make any sense at all? Yeah. Just this notion of constant churning and the appropriateness of that, and the healthiness of that, that we are constantly becoming, that we are not static creatures. Anyway, that's just what brain train I'm on there.
Well, and then if you go back to the show Dark, I think that maybe Hannah and her stagnation in basically her teenage years might be like the opposite of what it is that the show, or it might be trying to emphasize that like you don't want to be static, or you might end up like bitter.
Well, yeah, she hasn't worked on her character. If character is destiny, she's just exhibiting what she's always been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
she's the real big bad of the show. Like,
she might be. We don't know. She may end up being.
I mean, who knows? Who knows? No, I like and appreciate so much of what each of you are saying. And I do think about this notion. I mean, right now we have, oh Lord, like I was actually sort of entering into what was meant to be a final thesis statement from me, and I hope I don't explode us up for so much more, but you have these generational arguments right now happening, like where all over the internet you'll have people being classified by generations and somehow dismissed or validated based on their generational sort of landscape.
Okay, boomer.
Exactly. Like I'm thinking of okay boomer versus millennials and everything like that. But what's interesting about that is that time spent, and maybe this is directly related to Dark, time spent does not equate to maturity developed.
Absolutely.
And it is how you have navigated that time and what you have chosen to do with it or not do with it that will determine the maturity or not that you develop. And there is a certain degree of just time will make its mark on you. I'm paraphrasing something that Adam had said to Jonas, but like time will leave you with its particular scars, but there are better and worse ways to navigate those times, and the choices we make, and not only for our own personal development, but how we choose to spend our time will determine. I go back to something that Stephen King said specifically about writing that I've thought a lot of in different contexts, in the context of maturity and other subjects. Stephen King said about writing that, like, you know, there are bad writers, there are okay writers, and good ones and great ones. And I am painfully, awfully paraphrasing here, but he basically said that, you know, it's really impossible for a bad writer to become a great one. Like that's not really possible. But it is possible through the right tools and education and hard work for an okay writer to become a good one. And it's interesting to me about, like, there are spectrums of development and maturity that I do think are going to be sort of fundamental. You are who you are. Now, the counterpoint to that is I do believe, although how it plays out in the real is different for every person's story, but I do fundamentally believe as a Christian that it is possible to have a radical reshifting of your DNA and thought patterns, and I do think transformation is a viable and strong possibility, something that we as believers should constantly be pursuing for ourselves and to affect that change in the world around us as well. So I don't know that there will be, at least not from me, I don't know that there will be some definitive thesis statement, but so much of what we're exploring, not explaining, but so much of what we're exploring in these conversations, maybe could be boiled down to, in my feeble attempt at a closing argument, just be deliberate with how you spend your time, and be cognizant of who you were and who you are and who you would like to see yourself become, and correlate that to how you choose to spend your time, and who you choose to surround yourself with, and what you choose to surround yourself with, and how you choose to navigate all of it.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
That's exactly right. I love it so much.
That's a quote, by the way, in case you didn't get it.
No, I know. No,
Come on.
No, that is,
Come
that
on. I have a firm belief that I think I've quoted that in the 3 years of this show, but thank you for that offering.
That is probably true. But yes, Gandalf, indeed.
Yes.
It is interesting, Readin. I know you're trying to stop us, and hopefully that will be momentarily, but when you referenced, or when the OK Boomer joke came up a moment ago, it kind of sent my brain spinning, and I was just thinking about how you tied off your comment there, your treatise there, if you will, with the notion of radical transformation being possible. And I absolutely and utterly agree and think that's valuable to keep in front of us, because what it made me think of, the notion you put out of how we, I don't know if you use this language or not, but about labeling, it's like, you kind of bracket, you column people into certain groups, and like stereotypes exist for a reason. But the problem becomes when we live up to the stereotype, right? And I think what's valuable is when you can acknowledge I am part of a particular demographic. Transformation then happens, but only happens when it's willingly and humbly entered into. You know what I mean? We don't just generally, I would imagine this is the general course of human development. You don't just stumble into radical transformation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's important as we're propping up these character templates, Hannah being a really good go-to here. Like, Hannah is not going to just suddenly not be scornful anymore. Like, that has to be and the trajectory she's currently on, who knows if it'll ever happen, but like, as a through line for that person to alter character has to be willingly and conscientiously and with open eyes engaged and pursued. It doesn't just, she's not going to wake up one day and be like, you know what? I've been a real, for 30 years, like
maybe I should knock it off.
Just right. Anyway, I don't know. I just think it's an important note that if you feel pigeonholed, if you feel labeled, to kind of self-interrogate and be humble about, like, okay, well, what are my blind spots? What do I need to be open about? What, is transformation required in this? Anyway.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Before we pivot into the fog meter, Vera, did you have anything else to add, or are you going to let Gandalf's wisdom close your side of the statement?
I mean, I think I got to leave it with Gandalf. But you know what? Watch them introduce, like, Multiverse Hannah into the next season of the show, and she's just like
awesome.
The most altruistic person that you've ever seen.
She's just so giving.
Yeah.
She's like a benevolent chrono queen.
Yeah.
It's just populating the multiverse with goodness and love and joy.
I know that would be truly an unexpected turn.
I didn't see that coming. Did you, Read?
No, I didn't.
All right. As we do with so many of these pieces of material we cover, we are going to go to the fog meter, wherein we're going to discuss rank on a scale of maybe 0, but 1 to 10, fear, how scary a thing was, and God, or how substantive a thing was. Vera, you know the drill. As our guest, this is amazing. You get to, like, put your stamp on a season of television with us. So for you, how does Dark Season 2 rank on the fear meter?
Other than existential fears, I guess, about free will and determinism and identity, I don't think it's super scary, so I'm going to put it at a 3.
3. I can understand that one. Reed, what about you on the fear metric?
So I agree. Like existential dread is really all you've got going on with that, and even that it's lessened in season 2 than there is in season 1. So on the fear measurement, I'm actually going to go at 2.
Yeah, I think that if I were to take everything away from this season except just the Ulrich storyline, it might be like super high because my gosh, my poor man, he's just like he's suffering. But you know, it does kind of you don't really jump. There's not even that much in terms of horrific imagery. I'm going to split the difference between the two of you and go 2.5.
All right.
So pivoting us into the God meter, the substance metric, rather. Vera, how do you feel overall about Dark Season 2?
I think that there's a lot there, especially with the character Jonas. And I think that the show is very intentional with the colors, with the names of the characters, and with the specific imagery and language that they're using in the show. So I'm going to say an 8.
All right. I'll let you go last, Reed. For myself on substance of Dark Season 2, I think what's unfortunate for me is it's hard to make a pure judgment call on this without kind of knowing where it goes. I feel like there's a lot tossed up in the air that is semantically of substance, but I can't tell how much the show backs it up just yet. So I'm gonna hedge a little bit below you there, Vera, and land at a 6 for the substance meter on Dark Season 2. What about you, Reed?
I think there's a lot of great world building happening in it, but I still struggle to really land on something that they are really trying to say. So I'm going to give some credit for the world building, but ding it down for not really having a cohesive sort of substantial statement. I'm going to split the difference with a 5. So basically where that leaves us on the fog meter is a firm 4.5 for season 2 of Dark, Netflix's Dark season 2, 4.5. But I think the truly important question on everybody's mind, inquiring minds want to know, and I'm going to start with Vera. Vera, would you recommend Dark season 2 to people?
Yeah, I would and do recommend the entire series so far to people. I think it's worth a watch. Awesome.
How about for you, Nathan?
It's a cautious recommend on the second season, even though I've now watched it twice. You know, there's just a lot left up in the air in a way that season 1 didn't leave me feeling as much. So, but you know, generally, if a person liked season 1, they will find things to appreciate about season 2, and thus, yes, a recommendation.
I'm kind of right there with you as well. I think the show overall is a pretty easy recommend, even though I've got some complicated feelings about season 2 that are going to probably be tilted up or down depending on what they do in season 3. But where it stands right now, I would recommend Dark seasons 1 and 2 for anybody interested in that, in the kind of time travel exploratory storytelling that they're doing. So there we have it. I'm gonna prep you in brief for next week, but first of all, I want to very, very much thank our foreign correspondent Vera Gowdy for joining us once again for
bringing home speaking in tongues. Yeah,
that's
thank you.
Right. For bringing us back into Winden, and so
merci.
And so next week, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be starting a series. It's going to be kind of different for us because next season we're entering into December, and December brings with it the holiday seasons, some different seasons, if you will. This has also been, though we haven't done too much on the show this year, we've pivoted. This has been kind of the year of King, the #19, the year of Stephen King. And so we are going to conclude that same year with an exploration of some different seasons, if you will, some non-horror Stephen King material. And our first starting point is going to be the Rob Reiner film from I forget what years, the 80s. Should have been more prepared for that. But Stand By Me. Look up the Rob Reiner film, Stand By Me. Check it out for next week. And thank you again so much, Vera. Thank you again, as always, Nathan. And guys, we will see you next week for Stephen King's Stand By Me.
Thank you.
Vera.
And
Thank
happy
you,
American Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Happy belated Canadian Thanksgiving.
Thanks.
See you guys later.
Bye. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And you can continue the conversation in a variety of ways. You can follow us on Twitter at The Fear of God. You can like and follow us on Facebook, or join the Facebook Fear of God discussion group. You can follow us on Instagram at Fear of God Podcast, or go to morethanonelesson.com to leave a comment on this post or any of the other official episode posts. Email us at fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. Our theme music was composed by Lee Wright and Reed Lackey, and our podcast art was crafted by Jacob Hunt of jacobhuntcomics.com. Merchandise for the show can now be found at tpublic.com. Just search for The Fear of God Podcast, all one word. And last but not least, if you listen to us through iTunes, we would greatly appreciate a rating or a review. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.